Hello everyone, my name is Roya and I read a whopping 10 books in the second half of October. That is absolutely nuts. And that's not even everything I actually read because I do have 3 more current reads that I'm a significant portion of the way through. So it's not even just that I read 10 books in October, but I also read basically between those like a whole additional book. So that's just absolutely nuts to me. I did hit my new reading goal of the year, which is 150 books. I'm already at almost 160, so now I'm gonna try my damnedest to read 200 books during the year, so we'll see. But anyway, so I'm just gonna get into the books. So firstly, Blade of Fortru by Juliette Marillier. This is the second book in the Brede Chronicles. This one tells the story of one of the characters who we meet in the first book as she has to go to this faraway place to marry this douchebag guy, and she falls in love with his brother who's like chained up in the basement basically. So this was such a good book. It was absolutely nuts. Juliette Marillier does a really good job of with historical fantasy set in olden day Ireland, like medieval Ireland. And she does a really good job of the fantasy aspect, and the historical aspect is so well researched, and this is just such a good, super unputdownable book. The Well of Shades by Juliette Marillier. This is the third book in the Brede Chronicles. This follows a character who is a significant character in the first 2 books, as he goes to deliver the message of somebody's death from the second book to his family, gets there and finds the guy's daughter living in total poverty, and she has a 3-year-old and all of that stuff when she's only like 16, and it's just like messed up. And so since she's trying to like run away, he ends up taking her with him, so she goes to live at the court that he works at and all of that. But then there's this noble woman who is an absolutely deranged person, and she has absolutely no empathy, and she's just going around, like, for instance, she kills one of her handmaidens just because she got a boyfriend, gets away with it, makes it look like an accident, but some people are just not convinced. They're like, no, she had something to do with it. And so she tries to basically kill off one of our main characters just for being someone who people like, basically. And it's just absolutely nuts. So this was so unputdownable. Similarly, it's kind of funny because the first book in this trilogy was really kind of just okay. It was probably one of my least favorite of Juliette Marillier's books because there was not really a gripping page-turning aspect to it. But then these latter 2 books in the series were just so unputdownable. Hell for Hire. This is about a demon and a witch who try to stop Gilgamesh, who killed all the gods and is trying to basically take everything over. So this was a really kind of funny and witty and interesting book and all of that. I did feel like I just had a really hard time getting into it for a good portion of it, but it was ultimately pretty good. And then the ending of the book was so dream logic-y weird that it makes me want to read the second one now. The Lowest Healer and the Highest Mage. Unfortunately, this is going to make my worst list of the year. I read this because it's about ladies loving ladies, and unfortunately, instead of just ladies loving ladies, we get ladies loving ladies who one of them actually betrayed the other one because she hates her, basically, and landed her in jail for 7 years. And then suddenly needs her help again, and everything's suddenly fine. Like, that doesn't seem very healthy, you know? I don't really want these 2 people to be together. And then, this whole thing was written so terribly in a way that I could not tell what was going on half the time. And then it totally lost me towards the end of the book when it just really starts changing the narrative style and suddenly is breaking the fourth wall. So like the first person narration suddenly starts going like, I know I sound calm right now, but that was because blah blah blah, but that's because blah blah blah. She goes into and says, I went into this room and I'm not going to tell you what I saw there, and I'm not going to tell you what it smelled like, but suffice it to say it smells like dead bodies cut open or something like that. And I was like, that's like really terrible writing, and just what's the point of saying that you're not going to say what was in that room and then just saying what was in that room? I don't understand. I did not understand this book at all, and I didn't like it. A Coup of Tea by Casey Blair. Unfortunately, I was really disappointed in this. So this is about a princess who gives up being a princess and totally just leaves with nothing but the clothes on her back, and then just conveniently ends up at a tea shop and conveniently meets people who give her a job and a place to live, just not knowing she's a princess either when she doesn't like change her name either or anything like that. So I just didn't really understand that. Just the whole thing seemed way too convenient. And this whole thing is Asian inspired kind of, but the main character does not appear to be Asian at all. It seems like she's white, but and yet she's like the best tea master anyone's ever seen, and I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that necessarily. And this whole book was trying to do the low stakes fantasy type of thing, these small stories fantasy, and then ended up not really doing that very well, and then ended up having to make it high stakes. And it just didn't do that very well either. And so ultimately I was really disappointed in this book, unfortunately. There were things that I liked about it, but overall not my favorite. Luna Howls at the Moon. This is about a therapy dog named Luna whose children in group therapy get out one day. They just kind of leave and sneak out the window to go and find their friend at a park, and Luna goes with them to protect them and everything because she's a therapy dog and she knows that they need her. So along the way, they each face dilemmas that actually help what they're in therapy for, basically. So this was a really adorable book. It was a super quick read. I read it in like an hour. And yeah, it was just really cute. The Honey Witch. This is about a girl who in a fantasy world where everyone has a talent, meaning that everyone is gifted in some art form or other, and she is not, and her parents are like disappointed in her and all that stuff. And it turns out that the reason she doesn't have a talent is because she is actually a witch, and that is her skill. So she has to go and leave and join her grandmother in being a honey witch, which is basically a wise woman who uses honey to heal people, but then also has some supernatural abilities as well. So this book was really good. It was told in a really good way and everything, but I just could not get behind the world of the arts being the typical thing you're supposed to do. Without it necessarily even being any kind of commentary on the way that society works, in which you're kind of shunned for being involved in the arts in a lot of ways. I spent way too much of my life being a starving artist and being criticized for dedicating my time to art and barely being able to pay my bills or afford food or pay rent or anything, to just be fine with there being a fantasy world where being an artist is like just being just an office person or whatever. Like, that's basically like this world is trying to make being an artist or in some kind of art form being the normal thing that you should be doing, which is just so bizarre to me after my experience being an artist slash musician slash author, all that stuff, my entire life. So for that reason, I was not a fan of this book as much as I would have been otherwise. Loving someone with bipolar disorder, I would like to preface this by saying this is not about my husband. I was asked to read this to better understand something. So basically, this is a book that details bipolar disorder within the context of what families of someone with bipolar disorder go through, what spouses or partners go through, and how to manage a partner's bipolar disorder when they are manic and all of that. So so this was a really good read. I do think that this does have a lot of really helpful information for anyone going through that. Sister Song by Lucy Holland. This was a really good book. I thought that it was so well researched, but basically the fact that we get 3 point of view characters and it felt like 2 completely different books shoved into one kind of made it not as good as it could have been. I thought they either could have been 2 separate books entirely, or they could have been tied together a little bit better. But basically this is about 3 siblings, 2 of whom reenact the whole tale of the sister, the harp singing the sister's murder by the other sister. And then the other one is a trans man who is trying to be recognized as a man. And this whole book was so good. The magic in it was really good, but unfortunately I felt like we didn't get enough development of it. Each of the 3 siblings do have completely different magic, and so I felt like that was not tied together at all either. But ultimately I really enjoyed this book a lot. And finally, Spin of Fate by A.A. Forre. This is about a girl who lives in a fantasy world where people can either ascend into a different world where they are no longer plagued by just the horrors of the world, or they can stay in the horrors of the world. And we follow a girl who ascends, but then goes back to save her mother, who actually does not want to be saved and is a terrible person. So so it's definitely it was a really good magic system, really good world building and all of that, but I did just feel like there was a little bit of a disconnect in terms of just character depth overall, and I think it has mostly to do with just the way that the storytelling is, kind of. Like, I just didn't get the characterization that I wanted out of it. So those are the books that I read in the latter half of October. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon with a new video. Bye!